Hello, welcome back to Tayrock Rockin Well, the podcast. I am your host, Taylor Rockwell, and welcome back. Quite literally, welcome back. I am aware that it's been a very, 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 very long time since the last episode, but I have a lot of justification in the gap of why things have been taking so long, and I have tons of updates that I am so eager to talk to you about. I feel like I'm finally in a place in my life where I am making money moves. Really, I have taken a huge leap in my investing portfolio, my career, all within just the last 6 months or so, and I am so eager to share with you all with what I have learned, what I would recommend doing, kind of my plan on how I plan to become a millionaire in just 3 more years, but I'm quite literally on the right track, and I want to share with you how I'm doing it, how you can too, and let's get creative on different ways that we can start building our wealth together. But before I get into that, I want to just say hi. How are you? Some top of the show kind of feedback thing. 1, we have a podcast set. Okay, so I no longer have to record my podcasts in my car because we have a new set. I have professional filming, professional microphones. Obviously, I've always had these. We have the whole lighting set up, and we have a new backdrop, as you can see. So we are officially in business. I've been building this set for a couple months now, and it's officially live, ready to go, and I am ready to bring out consistent podcasts coming every single week again. I have missed podcasting so much. I always would be in the car and be like, I should make a podcast about that. And I'm like, but where would I film it? Whatever. It doesn't really matter, but life was kind of getting crazy, and it just feels so good to be able to be on this platform again and spend it with all of my listeners. You guys truly are the best, and I know a lot of you are in similar boats as me, where we are trying to become millionaires together, or if it's not a millionaire, something greater, something less, and I know all of you have big dreams, and building this community has been one of the best things that I have done for myself, and for just in general. Having this community of like-minded individuals means a lot to me, so I'm ready to fully be able to start dedicating my time again to this platform and really start sharing with you all that I've learned, because I've learned a whole lot. And anyway, I'm just gonna get rambly, so let's just kind of start. I made a few little notes here on how to keep me on track, so I'm gonna utilize them. But this episode is probably gonna be called How I Bought like $1 million investment property at 23 and how you can too, something along those lines. So that's the theme of this episode. How I actually did buy an investment property for $1 million just at the age of 23. I did end up turning 24, so I'm now 24, but this just happened just a few months ago, and I just turned 24, so that's kind of what the theme of this podcast is going to be. So if you want to learn how I did that and how you can too, stay along for the ride. I'm going to do a couple recap things at the top of the show. It's been months since I've recorded my last podcast, so where have I been in the last 6 months? 1, bought the investment property. Yes. 2, I passed my real estate exam. Okay, so I know in the last few episodes I was talking how I was studying for my real estate exam, but your girl took the real estate license exam not once, not twice, but 3 times, and finally passed it on her 3rd try. And I am now an official licensed real estate agent ready to help you buy or sell your next house in San Diego County. So I was studying really hard. It took like 4 to 6 months to go to real estate school, pass real estate school, and then get ready to take the exam. Now let's talk about the exam. If you're somebody who's interested in getting your real estate license, I would say do it immediately. If you're thinking about it, if you've ever thought about it, do it right freaking now. My life has changed. The day I got my real estate license, my life is changed for the better. And I want to talk about that a little bit later. But so if you're thinking about it, just do it. And I get like a lot of questions for people who are like, I want to get into real estate, how's the exams, blah, blah. The exams are kind of hard. I'm not going to lie. Well, listen, Jack also, my husband, Jack, he also got his real estate license just a few months before me. And he went to school and did it all, but there's a lot of time in between when you go to school versus when you schedule your exams. So if you're not studying in between that time, you kind of lose it. But he went to school, but then he took his exam like 2 or 3 months after he graduated. And so the night before, he kind of like crashed course and just studied really hard for like 4 or 5 hours right before bed. And he took the exam the next morning and he passed on his very first try taking the exam. But that's just my husband for you. He is just one of those people who's like perfect at everything. Like, I love him for it, but I'm also like, how? And he passed, and I asked him, like, is it hard? He's like, no, if you study, it won't be hard. But like I mentioned earlier, it took me 3 tries to pass the exam. So I don't ever go around telling agents that it was super easy, because in my opinion, it really wasn't. Some things that I noticed were the exams were completely different from one another. So I took it 3 times. So I got to see the exam in 3 different forms, and they're different from one another. I can't really remember. It's been a few months since I've taken the exam, but all the advice that I can give is simply just really understanding the concepts, in the sense of, like, if somebody were to ask you in any weird, bizarre way, do you really know what you're talking about? Because they do ask you in really bizarre ways certain questions, like, if so-and-so owns a house and then they want to sell it, and then this person buys it, but then that person ends up dying, and then this person also puts in an offer, what are you supposed to do? Just like all this craziness, and you don't really learn about that in school. You just learn about the term, what it's called, or, order of operations. So you really have to really know and understand the concepts. But anyway, on the 3rd time I tried, I was in, okay, so I took the exam the first 2 times, and it was, you go into this room, and they're like, really, really strict. I mean, it's a state exam, so it makes sense, but you go in and they're like, you can't wear any jewelry. You need to take all your jewelry off, and you can't have any like layers like of clothing. You need to have like your basic layers, and they make you like pull all your pockets inside out, and they make it like a really big deal. Which is fine. I understand why it's a big deal, but it really threw off my vibe the first time. I was like all ready to go take my real estate exam, and then I was stopped like by the front door by a security guard being like, you need to take all your rings off and all your jewelry, and it kind of just made me feel like, So anyway, it's kind of a side tangent, I guess. But they take it really serious, and when I was done with my first 2 exams, you walk out and they give you a piece of paper ultimately telling you if you failed or passed, but they tell you you cannot open that paper until you leave the building. So the first 2 times I opened it once I left the building, and the very first words were, "We regret to inform you." And obviously I was just really sad, and not even sad or beat up, just kind of like, damn, that sucks. I have to pay for another exam and do it again and keep studying. I wasn't too emotional or too in my head about it, but obviously it wasn't what I wanted. And what really sucks is the second time I took it, I was like, that's in the bag. Like, I got it in the bag. I was ready to like grab it, and then I read it, and it was like, we regret to inform you. And I was like, what? Anyway, so then the 3rd time I took the exam, I couldn't go outside. So I went down to the exam was like on the 3rd floor. So I went down to the main floor, and I went to the bathroom. And I actually recorded my reaction on social media, on Instagram and TikTok, if you want to see my reaction. But essentially, it was me putting my phone up and hitting record and being like, all right, I'm about to get my real estate exam results. And this is the 3rd time I took it, so I really hope I pass this time. And sure enough, I opened the letter, and the very first words say congratulations. I about lost it, and I was like jumping of joy. I was so hyped, and it was just a big accomplishment. I know everyone jokes about everyone and their mom being a real estate agent, so it seems like something that's really easy, and they're just kind of passing real estate license out to everybody, but it is a lot of studying and a lot of knowledge to know, mostly about the laws and regulations of real estate, and it's a lot of time and energy putting into your extra life of studying and then getting ready to take the exam. So I applaud everybody who does have their real estate license. I know a whole bunch about the studying and dedication that goes into it. So very happy for you, but also a little snap of applause for me because I'm still on a high for passing the exam and really starting to live my life. I feel like it's been so long, I don't even know how far back I'm supposed to go. So I'm just trying to do a quick recap of where I've been, and hopefully then I can start being more, we can really jump into the topics of these podcasts. So yeah, I bought an investment property. I passed my real estate exam. Oh, the third thing, I moved plants and Pilates. So if you didn't know, I'm also a business owner, and it is for indoor tropical houseplants. And I used to have a greenhouse in Fallbrook, California, and I had employees, and it was able for people to come in and they could shop around, the traditional brick and mortar that most people know for small businesses. And I realized that I no longer wanted to have a brick and mortar shop, and I wanted to just continue to do my online sales. And I think this will probably be something I talk about in a different episode, but I learned a lot in that time of being a business owner and having employees, having a shop, really having to manage a property and a business and all the above. So I learned a lot in that time, but I realized that was not the path for me. It just didn't feel really right. And I also was moving. So I lived in Escondido at the time, and if you didn't know, Escondido is really close to San Diego, but it's like right in between. So it's like San Diego, Escondido, Fallbrook. So when I was living in Escondido, driving to Fallbrook, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was like a 40-minute drive. However, I recently just moved back to San Diego, and making the drive from San Diego to Fallbrook was a truck and a half, and I wasn't willing to stay in Fallbrook anymore, so I tried moving to San Diego. I looked at a couple brick and mortar shops here in San Diego for plants and Pilates, but nothing really stuck out to me, plus the ones that did had pretty significant leases. So I didn't want a big, long lease on plants and Pilates. I just felt like it wasn't the road I was willing to go down. It didn't feel right, and it just didn't feel easy, and I wasn't ready to make the commitment, and I just knew that. So I closed the shop in Fallbrook, and I built a bunch of greenhouses here in San Diego where I've been able to nurse all of my plants and keep them happy, healthy, and alive. And I've just been maintaining all my online sales. Still been doing basically all the volume that I was doing online anyway, but now I'm just doing solely online. So more on that later, but that is just a quick recap with what I'm doing with my plant business and how I'm kind of shifting it now that I'm doing real estate as well. And then the last thing where I've been is I built a podcast that, like I said, this place is so rad. It isn't just a garage, but I took the time to kind of redo the garage. I drywalled it. I'm putting in, there's a window right there. I put in all these nice light fixtures. I put in a big study desk with like a conference desk in here. I did a lot of things, but I made this place really a creative space for me to be able to express myself on my creative platforms, such as my podcast, as well as just have a rad podcast studio. This is something I'm so eager for, because not only do I have a comfortable space to record my own podcast, but I have tons of guests lined up for the future episodes. Even though I haven't been recording my own podcast, I've still been working up a whole network and people that I want to have on my podcast, and it's in the works. I have plenty of guests scheduled for the episodes to come, and I'm so excited to get those recorded and out because I have some rad guests coming on. So there is kind of the update of where I've been, what I've been working on, and why it's been so long. I'm so sorry that it's been so long. It honestly makes me sad because I really like to be consistent and loyal to the ones that support my channel, my podcast, and really make me feel like I do have that supportive community, and I obviously wasn't holding up my end of the community, and I feel saddened by that, but also I want to just really make sure that you guys know that I've been working really, really, really hard in the background, getting my real estate exam, buying the investment property, setting up a podcast studio, and now we're more stable. All my big events are kind of done. They're kind of coming to a more sustainable system, and I'm ready to record. So please, please, please know that consistent podcasts are coming out weekly again, and it will not be huge gaps in between anymore, nor will I be in my car. Maybe in the future I will be, but for now I will be always on the podcast studio set. So yes, that is a little bit about me. I'm a little out of breath. How have you been? The last time I recorded a podcast was in November. And in November, we were doing a book club together. And I still want to continue the book club for those of you who started the book or those of you who didn't start the book, but you want to start right now. The book is How to Make Money Like a Badass, or Making Money Like a Badass, something like that, by Jen Sincero or something. Sorry if that's a little butchered, but that's all that's coming to the front of my mind right now. But in that book, I really wanted to have a book club where either you can read the book alongside with me and we talk about it every week, or if you're just somebody who doesn't like to read or you don't really find the time to read, I will read the book for you and kind of give you a brief note summary of what I got out of the book and kind of talk about it on my end. So even though we're in like chapter 2, or we're in chapter like 3, 4, 5, somewhere around there, I will continue to do book club, and I will do some podcast episodes like this. I also will be bringing on guests, and I also will be continuing book club. I just can't tell you exactly what order it is because I'm not sure yet, but I will figure it out. You'll obviously know what we're talking about in the description of everything, but that's a lot over the head. So I already am in 20 minutes in, and I was just recapping where I've been and kind of what you guys can expect as an audience moving forward. So let's just jump right into it on this week's podcast episode. How I bought $1 million investment property at the age of 23, and how you can too. So this is why I made this podcast. I have expressed on this podcast that I have always had this deep desire to just be wealthy. I don't know how to explain it. When I was like a little kid, I just remember really being envious of the kids that were like the rich kids or looked like they had money or whatever, just because I think I was really far from whatever they had. And whatever they had, I really wanted. It really just seemed like, oh, life would be so much better if I had these things. Obviously, I'm a lot older now, and I can comprehend that that's probably not the truth. And it was just my perception of a young developing mind on how I viewed money. It kind of built my perception of what money can do or the opportunity it can give you. So I think that's kind of where my infatuation started with money, or why I just have this burning desire to be successful. Why I was like, if I work hard and I get a good paying job, I also can support my family. I also can support myself, and I also can feed myself the things that feels as if other people have that I didn't at the time of being so young. So I think that's kind of the root of all of this. So when I got to become a little bit older, maybe high school, college, I just always had this gut feeling that I was going to be rich. And it's funny because I remember in 7th grade, having to write an essay about what you wanted to be when you grew up. And it's funny because I remember Googling like what job makes the most amount of money, and it was like environmental engineer. It was the first thing that came up. So I was like, I wrote a whole essay on how I wanted to become an environmental engineer. And it's interesting because I have no interest in being an environmental engineer. I just had interest in making money. And it's funny because I guess I didn't know what an entrepreneur was at the time, but it's always lived within me, and it's pretty obvious just by that little example alone that I was like, I don't care what I got to do to make a lot of money. That's just what I want to do. So even though I knew I wanted to be wealthy and I had these big dreams to be wealthy, I didn't know how. I really didn't know what it took to get there. I love my family. So when I talk about this, it's all respect to my family's name. But really, my mom is the type of person who she went to college, she got her master's degree, she got a really good paying job, and now she's going to work those good paying jobs until she can retire. And that's kind of just what she knows, what she was taught, and what she deems as successful in her life. And even though that is very successful on a lot of metrics, that's not necessarily the road I wanted to take or how I wanted to get to my success levels. So even though I was like, well, I want to be really wealthy, I don't know how to get there. I thought long and hard about it. And this is kind of where the story begins on how I started to build my investment portfolio for real estate. And now it seems so clear. Now that I sit here on April 26th, I know exactly how I'm going to become a millionaire. It's so crystal clear for me. I can give the exact steps. I can give the exact procedure and tell you the exact date it's going to come to fruition. But that's because I have done a lot to put my plays in place to be able to know and acquire that. But it wasn't always that simple. So I'm kind of jumping before and after. So I kind of want to talk about, even though I knew I was going to be wealthy, I didn't know how. And this is kind of the story on how I started to figure it out. How? So in 2020, I bought my first piece of real estate. And this is around February or March of 2020. Jack just came home from deployment, my husband, and he came home one day and he was like, we need to buy a house. And I was like, with what money? I kid you not, with what money? We probably had about $10,000 in credit card debt and nothing in the savings. Absolutely nothing. So I was really like, you're crazy. What do you mean you want to buy a house? And he was like, I don't know. We just need to make it happen. I just have a feeling that this whole COVID stuff is going to be really heavy and we should probably buy a house and try to find some security before things get crazy. Mind you, this was March of 2020. So I was like, okay. So he's like, let's just get pre-approved and let's just see what we can afford. So we go through a pre-approval process with the VA and we get pre-approved for like $550 and they're like, okay, here's your pre-approval letter of $550 and here's your realtor. So I met my realtor. Her name was Megan Horton. And from there, the day I met Megan to the day we were closing and getting the keys to our house was a 6-week duration. It was very, very, very fast paced. I don't know if any of you were buying houses in 2020, but it was insane. Everything was flying off of the shelves. I put 7 offers in on houses and I finally got the 8th house. And the 8th house wasn't even because I was the highest best offer. It was simply that my real estate agent had a good relationship with the selling agent and they were able to be like, hey, would you mind accepting my client's offer? And so I guess they probably picked my offer out of pity. But that's okay. I got the house. And so I got the house in Escondido and we bought it for quite literally at the brim of what we can afford. I bought it for exactly $550. I barely could afford it because I had to add all in this like flooding insurance, this fire insurance. I had to do all this stuff and I was boiling over. I quite literally could afford this house with the $0 I already had and all this extra insurance stuff. So I just want to be honest and upfront with how I bought the house. We used a VA loan. And if you don't know what a VA loan is, one of the best perks for it is that you have the option of putting 0% down, which is huge. That means I was able to buy a house with literally $0 down on the loan. The only things that we had to pay for were closing costs and yeah, I'm pretty sure we only paid for closing costs and it was about maybe $12,000 or so. And we were able to save up that. We just saved like our paychecks because we didn't have a rent because I don't remember exactly. It's kind of long, but somehow we were able to come up with $12,000 within a month. And we came up with that. We paid the closing costs. We bought the house in 6 weeks in a crazy 2020 market with interest rates mad low. And we got the house. So I bought this Escondido house, $550, and I'm living in this house, and it's great. Let me tell you, this house, I think I made a podcast when I was getting ready to sell the house, how sad I was. But this house really did mean a lot to me. It was by far the biggest house I've ever lived in, the nicest house I've ever lived in, and it was just gorgeous. Like, one of the most gorgeous houses. I still will always co-sign this house. It had cathedral ceilings. It had such a dynamic architectural look to it. It had beautiful French doors when you came in. If you actually want to see the house, I did a whole house tour on my YouTube channel where I was getting ready to sell the house, so I was cleaning it up. So I kind of made a little vlog about it. So if you want to look at the house, I just loved it. I still to this day think I love that house. And so anyway, I lived in it for about maybe a year and a half. And at a year and a half, we kind of were like, okay, our monthly mortgage payments were $3,000. And even though we could afford a $3,000 mortgage payment, we weren't living life having a $3,000 mortgage payment. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know how to say it. It's like we weren't like struggling, but we weren't like having extra money to like go live like a lavish life, like going out to eat a lot or going on trips, or it was always like money wasn't like liquid at the time. So we started thinking like, okay, well, how can we start making a little bit of money on just different ways, just getting creative. So we thought to actually rent out our house. And we talked to a management company, and they came out and they like appraised our house for like what they think it would rent for. And essentially they were only able to rent it out for like $2,800. So we still were going to have to pay about $200 a month in this house, and then also figure out where we're going to live, or if we're going to rent, if we're going to try to buy another house, whatever it was. And at the time, we just were like, that's more of a long-term investment. That's not really where we're at in our life right now. We're kind of working on more short-term investing, maybe. I don't think we really knew what we were doing at the time yet. So anyway, so then I looked into my options of selling my house. So I went back to Megan, my realtor, and I said, hey, I think we want to sell this house. And like I said, we bought in 2020. It is now 2022. And if you're following the market, or if you knew anything about the market at this time, we are in a peak. We're at an all-time high. Everything's selling. Everything's going for multiple offers, above asking. We're in a good place for the real estate market. So she goes, yeah, let's talk about it. Anyway, long story short, I ended up selling that house for $830. Maybe it was $820 or $840. Somewhere around there. $820 to $840. Somewhere in there, but I think it was $830. So we ended up selling the house for $830, which if you kind of do like the quick math, that was just about $200,000 difference that was in our bank account. So the day we closed on our house, I got the biggest check. It literally said $200,000 just went to my bank account. It was insane. I remember being like, oh my God, I'm rich. But before we go into that, I want to talk about some things. So one, I now had $200,000 in my bank account, and I knew how fast it would be to spend that money. I don't think $200,000 is even that much money in the grasp of what it takes to live off $200,000. Maybe it would last me a couple years and then it's gone. And I was just thinking about the mistakes that I had made with buying my first house, and how the mortgage was so high that it didn't leave much room for me to live the life that I had envisioned for myself. And when I wanted to rent it out, it didn't make much sense because I still was kind of negative and having to cover the difference of my mortgage. So that house wasn't really an option of something. I just didn't want to just sell that house and then jump into the same situation, essentially just buying a different house and being the exact same way. So I really was like, how do I make this $200,000 spread, and how do I make this money make me money for the rest of my life? That was my only goal. And at this point, I have this $200,000 in my bank, and I'm holding on to every little cent because I'm like, I need to invest this money. And this is probably the beginning of where I am a little blossom at this point. So Jack and I, we really sit down and we're like, what are we going to do with this money? And I'll tell you exactly what we did with it. So we ended up buying a tiny house for, I think it was like $80,000. Yeah, I think it was like 80 or 90. I can't really remember, but it was close to 100,000. It was about half the money. And we were like, okay, let's buy this tiny house and let's live in it for the duration of however long it takes us to buy and find our next property. So the reason we did that was because even though we sold at the peak in 2022, things were starting to come down. So we sold in around April or May of 2022, but things were slowly starting to trickle down. And not only did I want to kind of like breathe, selling the house takes a lot out of you. I was so tired. Selling a house, I never want to sell a house again. It was terrible. So I just kind of wanted to breathe for a minute, but I also was not wanting to take too much time off, and I just wanted to figure out what the best investment is for me, and I didn't want to have to jump into something just because I needed a place to live. So I bought the tiny house, and it is exactly what you're thinking, the traditional TLC, tiny house nation, little tiny house on wheels, the whole shebang. Is really cute. It was made in 2020 and it was built in Canada, so it's really cool. They have like little Canada little touches to it, like the floors are heated. It's really modern, it's gorgeous, it's like bohemian, all brand new appliances. It's one of my favorite things that I still own. So I bought the tiny house, and I was living in the tiny house with me, my husband, and my 2 dogs, my big old dogs too. We were living together, and in that time, we were just focused on making sure we just buy something that makes sense for an investment. And this is when we started looking at duplexes. And this is where my thought process is. I have only about $100,000 left after I just bought this tiny house. And I want to make sure I spend it strategically, but this time I've learned my lesson that don't buy something that doesn't make money. Essentially, that was the biggest lesson. So this time I'm only going to buy a property that generates income for myself. So in like October, we finally found my $1 million house, and this is what I ended up buying. But the house is really, really, really unique because it has a main house, which is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, and it's in the heart and soul of San Diego. It's right in La Mesa area, but it's on the cusp of La Mesa because even the neighbors behind that house are San Diego. So it's really on the brim, but I'm technically in La Mesa City, but that's okay. And this house also had an ADU attached to it on the lot. And if you don't know what an ADU is, it is an additional dwelling unit. You can kind of think of it as a guest house or just an additional house, like a bonus house on the lot. This is amazing because it was a detached ADU. So I had 1 3-bed, 2-bathroom in the front, and then I had another house in the back that was a 1-bed, 1-bath. Super lucked out because it was remodeled. It was freshly flipped. I bought it from a flipping company, so it was turnkey, ready to move in, ready to start doing all my business ventures with. And this is where the fun began. So I am sitting here and I bought this house for, it wasn't exactly $1 million. I ended up buying the house for $940,000, so about $60,000 under $1 million. But I'm going to call it $1 million house for the sake of this title. So mind your business. But yeah, I bought this house for $940, and I ended up putting the $100,000, however much left we had, I ended up putting a good lump sum of it down on the down payment for the duplex. And now the rest is kind of history. But these are the lessons that I've learned. I now rent out the main house, and I also Airbnb the ADU. And you're thinking, well, where did the tiny house go? I also am Airbnb out the tiny house. Now, so let's talk about what a mortgage on a $1 million house costs in San Diego, California. I ended up buying the house at a 6.25 interest rate in November of 2022. And with that, the mortgage is close to $7,000. But even though it's about $7,000, the main house covers about, I don't know. I don't want to give exact numbers because don't want to say anything wrong, but essentially it covers majority of the mortgage, and the ADU Airbnb just needs to make $2,500 a month to cover the difference. So that would mean the main house makes about $5,000. And it does. The Airbnb always makes $2,500 at least. It does really well. And then anything that the tiny house makes is just extra. And so, just to be transparent, because I don't ever want to create an illusion of like, oh, it's super easy, or like, oh, just do this, because I feel as if there are a lot of sacrifices I made to make this deal happen. And one of the sacrifices is that I used my VA loan to purchase this house. And even though a VA loan is 0% down, one of the things is that you have to be your main residency. So even though I bought this house with 0% down, I still needed to live in it. And even though I put money down, it's still a 0% down program. But in order for me to afford the loan, I needed to put money down. So I don't remember how much it was, but I used the extra money I had from the sale of my last house to put down on this house. And then I bought this house. So I'm currently actually living in the main house, and I'm renting out 2 of the rooms. And I'm doing that because my plan and my goal is to essentially show that this property makes a lump sum of income. I'm going to file it on my taxes, and then I'm going to refinance this house from a VA loan to a conventional loan, and then I'm going to rinse and repeat. Essentially, once you pay off your VA loan, you get it back. So I'm going to refinance this house from a VA loan to a conventional loan. Then I'm going to reuse my VA loan with 0% down to purchase another house, which then I will move into while I probably Airbnb out this last house I bought or rent it out to the tenants still. Haven't decided exactly what I'm going to do, but yeah, I haven't decided. I think I will probably most likely Airbnb it out. But that doesn't matter. So anyway, then I will move to the next house, use my VA loan, and then this property that I bought, the house with the 3-bedroom and the ADU, this is nothing but a revenue generating lot. I did it. It pays for the $7,000 mortgage itself, and then I get some, and that extra income will allow me to be able to prove that I make extra income aside from, my husband's 9-to-5 and my real estate income to help us buy our next property, and then rinse and repeat. We'll probably live there, we'll probably do renovations, we'll probably get it ready to be rented, however long that takes. Then we'll refinance to a conventional loan. Then we're going to move again, buy again with our VA loan, and kind of just continue to do that. I'll probably use my VA loan like a bajillion times in this lifetime because it's such a life hack. So if you have a VA loan, please do not sleep on it. It's very, very, very powerful and can definitely help you build your real estate portfolio. So I kind of feel like I don't know if I explained it well. Let's just go over it in a simpler term. Bought my first house, $550. Sold it, $830. Took $200,000 and I bought a tiny house for about $100,000. And then I used the other $100,000 to buy a house for $940. Because I have a VA loan, I had to live in that house. So I rent out the main house to essentially myself and 2 other people. Then I Airbnb out the ADU and I Airbnb the tiny house. However, I'm getting ready to refinance this house into a conventional loan to free up my VA loan with 0% down. I'm going to buy another house here shortly and I will live in that other house. And I now own 2 houses. One of the houses, this $1 million estate I just bought, is all revenue flowing. It pays for itself. It pays for the $7,000 mortgage all by itself, and then I also get some. That additional income that I make, I'm going to use that to qualify me for the next house that I buy, and I plan on doing that here in the next 6 months. So I'm planning on kind of, really just moving my real estate and really starting to build a real estate portfolio. Now, I hope I explained that well. If you have any questions, please reach out. But that is just kind of what I'm doing. A lot of people ask, well, Taylor, what am I supposed to do if I don't have a VA loan and the luxury of putting 0% down? If you're in California, talk to me. Or if you're not in California, still talk to me. But really, there are a lot of government-backed loan programs that can help you. One of the most common one is called FHA loans, and those only require you to put about 3.5% down. So you're still going to have to save up a little bit. There are other programs that allow for people to put 0% down. There's put down payment assistant programs. So you don't really need to have all the money in the world to start buying real estate. You just need to know what your options are and start leveraging them for your situation and yourself and kind of where you live and what your real estate goals are. I'm just sharing my journey because I just want to help people. Nobody's ever showed me the way. My mother has always just gone to school and got a good job. She didn't have that necessarily entrepreneur mindset of how do I build a real estate portfolio. I don't ever think that's even been on the front of her mind ever. So now that I'm kind of experiencing all of this for the first time in real life, I want to share my experience on how I'm doing it so that way you listening to this podcast right now can think, I have a VA loan. I should do something similar. Or, I think I can look into FHA loans and see if I can do something similar. Or whatever situation you're in, start thinking about how can I start building my own real estate portfolio, because let's be honest, I just shared with you the exact truth. I just laid all my cards on the table and told you everything you need to know. The fact that I literally had negative $10,000 in credit cards when I bought my first house. And the only reason truly that I had any money at all to start building a real estate portfolio is because I bought my first house in 2020 for $550 and I profited $200,000, and I was like, I'm not going to spend this $200,000 just to spend because it's only going to last me a couple years. I'm going to use this $200,000 and I'm going to put it in an investment that'll feed me for the rest of my life. And that is exactly what I did. I put it in a property, in essentially a duplex, because it has a main house and the ADU, 2 doors, 2 separate units that I'm going to rent out that will quite literally feed me and my mortgage for the rest of my life. I'm probably never going to sell that property. It's probably going to be a revenue generating property for the rest of my life until I die. And I'm going to use that property essentially to qualify me for the next loan, the next loan, and the next loan. And essentially, that's what I'm doing to build my real estate portfolio. And it's not exactly easy. It does come with some sacrifices. For example, I mentioned that I'm renting out 2 of the rooms in the main house while I'm also living in it. And even though that's not an ideal circumstance, there's some things that I tell myself and I learned it from Grant Cardone or Elaine Cardone, I believe. But they always say, pay the price now so you can pay any price later. And that stuff really, resonates with me. It's like, yeah, it's not ideal, but it's a price I'm willing to pay so that way I can afford my house eventually. And let's be honest, I learned my lessons when I bought my very first house that I shouldn't have bought the nicest, biggest, beautiful, my dream house at the time because it didn't make me any money. And the lesson I've learned is I am not going to buy my dream house in a very, very, very long time. I want to live in a multi-million-dollar house with beachfront views and the most pristine looking thing you've ever seen. And let's just be honest, the only way I'm going to get there is by buying other investments before I can even think about what my house looks like. So even though I bought this house in La Mesa and I'm living in it, it's not my house. And I kind of want to talk about that too. Okay, let me slow down. The best advice I can give you right now, if you're listening to this and you're like, I also want to build my investment portfolio, the best advice I can give you just off of the lessons I've learned is do not let your first house you buy be the house you want to live in. Promise me, please, pinky promise me that you will not let the first house you buy be the house you live in. And what I mean by that is it doesn't really matter what you think. If it's like, oh, I don't know, the layout was kind of weird, or I don't know, I don't really like that paint color, or, I wish it had an extra bedroom. Stuff like that obviously you want a nice place to invest in, so it's fine if it's nice, but little things like layout or color are unimportant when you're buying a investment property. Instead, my advice for you when you start looking for investment properties would be, what would rent well? What's close to the airport? What's close to the beaches? What's close to shopping centers? What's close to neighborhoods where people would want to visit? And when I was buying the investment property, I would have to put my shoes on as if I was somebody else, as if I wasn't buying the property. I would put my shoes on and be like, if I was renting this place, would I like it? And why would I like it? Is it close to sushi restaurants? Is it close to gas stations? Even though I drive an EV. You know what I mean? Just trying to really put my shoes in what makes the property I'm about to buy a good investment property. Now, I've learned so much in the last 6 months, and I feel like I have so much information to share. But if you're asking yourself, how do I know if I should spend $1 million on an investment property and know that I'm going to make my money back? I would recommend you messaging me, and I can send you all the formulas that I used. There's lots of websites. One in particular is called rentometer.com, and you can put in the address and it will kind of tell you on average what it's renting for, if it's in good condition, mild condition, or poor condition, and it kind of breaks down the differences on that and kind of shows you, basically just run comps on what all your neighbors are renting their houses for. And I also can I can just help you with anything. I've been through it. I've done it a couple times, and now I do it for my real estate clients, and I've become quite good at it, and it's quite fun for me. So if you're interested in that, I would recommend you messaging me. But essentially, that's kind of how I did it. That's how I bought my first $1 million. That's how I bought my first $1 million house and investment property. And even though it's like not that cool of a story, I don't think it's like, oh, I worked all night and all long and saved up 30 years. Like, it's just the truth. I just want to be transparent on how I'm buying property and how I was able to afford $1 million house, because when I say it out loud, it doesn't sound that cool. When I tell the story, it's like, oh yeah, I bought one house and then I used the money on that to buy another house. But it's like, I found that people just don't think about it. And so this is kind of my challenge to you, is like, think about it. The house that you live in right now, whether you rent it or own it, kind of think like, is there any opportunity for me to make money here? And if there isn't, then what moves can I be making right now to potentially help me make money in the future. And that is like by far the biggest lesson I've learned, is I'm never going to buy a house that I want to live in for a very, 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 very long time until I can afford my absolute dream house, which I know the day will come, but that day is not near, and that's not where my focus is. Right now, I'm focused on only buying properties, starting with a duplex, then going to 3 doors, then going to 4, until I can afford maybe apartment complexes, until I can start affording like cool luxury estate on a lakefront or in a vacation area. I don't know exactly what properties I'm buying next, but I do know within the next year or so I'm buying another property, and I will definitely take you along with that journey with me now that I'm going to be consistent with these podcasts. It almost bums me out that I didn't record podcasts when I was in the midst of buying my first investment property. Like one day I was just like, oh yeah, I closed on $1 million house and rad, and this is, you know, kind of my plan on how I plan on becoming wealthy. But, you know, it is what it is. I didn't record it. And so now I want to kind of backtrack, tell you how I did it, and bring you along for the ride, because this is just the beginning. This is my first $1 million house, but I have in my future many, many more to come. I can't even express how lucky and fortunate I feel to have even like taken care of myself enough to have thought, what could I do with this $200,000 to feed myself? And, you know, I just want to be honest, like, that $200,000 is gone. Obviously, I bought a tiny house with it, and now I put it on a down payment. It's gone. It's not in my bank account. But what I will say is, because I bought investment properties, that $200,000 feeds me a lot more every single month than I could have ever imagined. And even though it does come with a price, like obviously now I'm a landlord, and I'm also an Airbnb host, and I have to manage my Airbnbs, and you know, I started taking on these new roles that I necessarily didn't. You know, no one grows up to be like, oh, I want to be a landlord. You know, it's kind of now in my deck of cards, and I'm getting more and more comfortable with the experience I'm having. I'm learning a lot, and most importantly, now that I'm in real estate, I'm meeting a ton of contacts that allow me to have support, I guess. They kind of have either they're renting something out themselves, they already have an Airbnb, they already know what to do, they're kind of providing me with like resources. You know, I'm making my own contacts, I'm meeting my own people, and I really feel as if I'm finally where I'm supposed to be. I just got my real estate license. I've been doing real estate full time, all in, and I have been doing my own real estate investments with the Airbnb and the rental, and I'm just all in. I feel like I'm right where I'm supposed to be. I feel like I'm glowing. I feel like I finally have found my path. I have a clear idea of how I'm becoming a millionaire in just 3 years. And it's simply, I just gave you my secret. I just handed you all my cards. It's simply just buying and building a real estate investment portfolio. And that's how I plan on doing it. And I hope that in this episode it inspires you to think about how could you do something similar, and what competitive advantages do you have that you can utilize to start building your investment portfolio, whether that's in real estate or a different investment. This doesn't have to be necessarily real estate, but I will say all my experiences in real estate, and let's just say it's worth it. Like, everyone says invest in real estate, and there's a reason why, and it's because I've seen firsthand the payouts and the return on investing in real estate can really offer you, such as owning a house for only 2 years and getting $200,000 from it just for living in a house. That's insane. And obviously we were in a pandemic at the time, and that really fluctuated our interest rates and affected our housing market directly. But, you know, it's kind of not necessarily trying to guess what happens, but just trying to make your plays accurately. Like, Jack came home and was like, yo, the world's gonna get crazy, we should buy a house to get stable. And I think I owe him all of that, because he couldn't have been more right. I'm so fortunate that he did that, because now 2 years later I guess it's like 3 years. But 3 years later, after we bought our first house, now we own $1 million house that produces revenue and pays for itself. Like, it sounds that simple, so I don't always want to make it seem like it's so easy. Why doesn't everybody do it? It does come with a lot, and it comes with a lot of headache, such as the landlord, Airbnb, all the things, the liability. But if it's something that you're willing to take on, I would 1,000,000% say do it. That's kind of my plan. That's kind of my spiel. I feel like I talked a lot. Obviously, it's my podcast. But I feel like I kind of explained the story in such a short way that I possibly could. Obviously, I'm sure many of you have questions. So if you do, message me on Instagram. It's just Taylor_Rockwell. If you also want to follow me to see my real estate journeys, it's Tayrock. Wait, let me make sure. It's Tayrock_Rockin Real Estate. It looks like this. That's me. I post some cool stuff. I just posted the inside of an $8.3 million penthouse, and it was gorgeous. It was phenomenal to look at. So definitely go check out what I've been doing on my real estate things. And I also have one more little secret surprise that I'm going to be announcing next week, so stay tuned, because I have a big project that I'm working on, and it involves real estate and might involve TV and might involve something really rad. But that's all I'm gonna say, so please come next week to kind of hear my new announcement. But anyway, I think that's all I have. What do you guys think of the set? Do you like it? And, what are we getting? Should I change this? This is easy to change. So I think maybe I'm going to do some like holiday themed ones, or maybe something cool. Oh yeah, and I got a tattoo. Look at this. I don't know if you can see, but I got a little toucan, a little sun, a little hibiscus flower. We got some monstera leaves, some bird of paradise. We got a rad new tat. Pretty cool. This tattoo is interesting because it's like the first tattoo that I've received that I like look at all the time. And even though I have a lot of tattoos, this one was the first one that felt like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. So I'm still kind of getting used to it. Honestly, it was kind of a lot. I wasn't expecting to be like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of tattoo. But anyway, that's the end of this podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for getting through this hour if you already got here. Like I said, I'm so sorry I've been gone, but no more. I'm back on track. The studio is in full effect, and I feel like I'm finally in the point of my life where things are aligning just perfectly, and I want to bring you along for the ride. I want to share the good vibes. You can attach yourself to them and share the loving energy of opportunities coming to you and me very, very often. And with that, I will see you in the next episode. Mwah. Bye.